Hello! Welcome to Mr. Joshua's classroom. Today we're going to read a book about one of the former presidents of the United States. Let's see if you can guess who it is. He was the 44th president of the United States. He was president for 2 terms, meaning 8 years. He was the first black president of the United States. Do you know who it is? That's right, Barack Obama. So today we're reading a book called Barack. It's written by Jonah and illustrated by A.G. Ford. And the illustrations in this book are really beautiful. All right, so let's get started. Barack. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far he has come. The man whose name the world now knows, Barack Obama. This is a journey that began in many places. It began in Kansas, home of Barack's mother. It began in Africa, home of Barack's father. It began in Hawaii, one moonlit night, the night Barack was born. Sometimes it was a sad journey. When Barack was just a toddler, his father moved far away. Sometimes it was an enchanted journey. When Barack was only 6 years old, his mother brought him to Indonesia to live with her new husband. For young Barack, Indonesia was a most exotic land. His stepfather kept an ape as a pet and 2 crocodiles. But it wasn't all wonderful in Indonesia. There was poverty unlike anything Barack's young eyes had ever seen. And sometimes Barack felt very out of place. Who am I, he wondered, surrounded by his Indonesian classmates. He looked different from them. He spoke a different language. His birthplace was thousands of miles away. Where do I belong? These were the questions Barack would ask again and again on his most unusual journey. But when the journey brought him back to Hawaii alone to attend an American school, the place where he belonged was with his loving grandparents, who took good care of him until and after the thankful day that his mother returned to Hawaii with his new half-sister Maya, only to go back to Indonesia, taking Maya with her. Oh, sometimes it was a confusing journey. When Barack was only 10 years old, his father just showed up one day, a total stranger. Who was this man? Barack would wonder through the years, for this was the only time he ever saw his father, who had long since moved back to Africa. And when his father packed his bags to leave again, Barack could not stop imagining what his father's homeland, Kenya, must be like. On the other side of the world, there were half-brothers, half-sisters, aunts, uncles. They wore different clothes, they spoke a different language, and yet they were his family. Where do I belong? The voices inside his head kept asking. In school, he had friends of all different backgrounds. African American, Caucasian, Hawaiian, he belonged with them all. But still, Barack's mother was Caucasian and his father was African. So what did that make Barack? For Caucasians, it simply made him black. For some African Americans, though, it made him less African American. Who am I? Oh, but this was a journey on which Barack would find out exactly who he was. From his college days, when he learned how much he could move people just with the power of his words and a speech, to his early days in Chicago, where his job was helping poor people help themselves and helping them for very little pay. Some people thought he was too young, too privileged to ever understand their poverty. Sometimes it was a lonely journey. What am I doing here? He often wondered, with the cold Chicago wind in his face, slowing him down, pushing him back. But he didn't give up. For somehow his journey had led him to Trinity Church, surrounded by the people from his neighborhood, including many he had helped. And there, swept up in the waves of their singing, with tears on his cheeks, he knew why he was there. He knew who he was, and he knew where he belonged. He was there in Chicago because he cared about these people. They were his family. People in Kenya were his family. Indonesians were his family. And no matter where he was, the world was his home. And who he was could be summed up in one word: lovable. When you learn to love yourself, you make it easier for others to love you. That's what happened to Barack, who started climbing a ladder of popularity that led him to a seat in the Illinois State Senate, and then up farther to the U.S. Senate. He arrived here during a dark time in American history. All across America, people were losing their jobs, losing their houses, losing their sense of hope. Many people were tired of a war that had gone on too long. They were tired of fighting with their neighbors over politics. They were just tired. In an earlier age, there had been hope. There had been a man named Martin Luther King Jr. who had spoken with a passion of his hope for better days. He had said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." And on the horizon, at the dawn of a new age, there appeared a man who would be the embodiment of King's dream, a presidential candidate whose very being was a bridge that joined nations. Here was a man who spoke of hope and change, whose strong words lifted up the downhearted people and made them believe that the world was not beyond repair. Here was a man whose journey had brought him to cheering rallies all around America, including one in Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham was a place where policemen had once turned fire hoses on African Americans, who for many years were made to sit at the back of the bus, drink from separate water fountains, watch as their churches were burned to the ground. And here, right here, this great man spoke in a beautiful, beautiful voice about his own dream of bringing people together, overcoming our differences, not just in America, but around the whole world. Here, right here in this country, with its history of slavery and racism, an African American named Barack Obama rose to unimaginable heights because he refused to let other people tell him who he was. Because again, once again, his journey was just beginning. Now, this book was published before Barack Obama became the president. This book was published whenever he was running to become president. So we know that his journey did just begin at the end of this book, because after this book was published, not only did he become president, but he was the president for 2 terms, meaning 8 years. So, the story of Barack Obama. Now, I have a question for you all. This book has a theme that kind of goes throughout it. The theme is presented as a question that Barack asks himself several times in the book. Do you remember what that question is? Yes, the question is, who am I? Where do I belong? He asks himself this question 3 or 4 times throughout the book. Who am I? Where do I belong? So I have a question for you. You can respond in Edmodo, or if you are watching this with another class, then you can respond in your journal or on a piece of paper, or you can share your ideas with a classmate. But I have a question for you. Who are you? Where do you belong? We know that Barack was born in Hawaii, then he lived in Indonesia, then he went to Chicago. We know that his mom was a white woman, his dad was a black man from Kenya, then his mom got married to a man in Indonesia, so he had an Indonesian stepfather and an Indonesian sister. So he had a lot of different cultures going on in his life. He lived in a lot of different places. So it was kind of difficult for him to take all of those factors and put them together and say, all of these things make me who I am, and this is my identity. Because identity can be something complicated. And as we know, we saw that Barak said that he had to decide who he was. He couldn't let people tell him who he was. He had to decide that for himself. So identity is something that we choose. Identity is something that we feel about ourselves. So I'd like to know, what is your identity? Where do you belong? Who are you? What things are important to you? So please leave your responses in Edmodo or on a sheet of paper. And I can't wait to hear about who you are and the things that are important to you. All right, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the book Barak by Jonah Winter, and I'll see you next time. Bye.